I'm going to come back into Visual C++ Express and come into the person class, and I'm going to add a line to the constructor that just prints out a statement that we're in the constructor. That'll help to be able to track when the constructor runs, and after we add a destructor, we'll also be able to check when the destructor runs. I'd like to print something out on the screen, so that means I need to include IOStream. Then I can just come in here and say, in the standard library, I'd like to use cout, and I'll send it constructing. And just so I can tell them apart, I'll send the first name and a space and the last name, and then an end line character. Now every time we construct something, there'll be output written out that we can take a look at. I'm now going to add a destructor to this class. It doesn't really have any genuine work to do. We don't allocate or acquire any resources when we're initializing a person, so we don't need to clean any up. But I'm just going to add one so that we can have an output statement. And the rules for a destructor is that the name is this tilde followed by the name of the class, and it doesn't take any parameters. And then in here, I'm going to implement the destructor. When writing the constructor, we have to start with saying the name of the class, and then the name here of the destructor, and it doesn't take any arguments. And it has an open and a close. I'm just going to copy this line and now we're going to print out when the destructor goes off. I could just run this code as is. I'm going to make one small change. I mentioned that scope ends when control reaches a brace bracket. You can have a brace bracket for whatever reason you want. You might have them as part of some ifs and loops and things we haven't covered yet, but you can also just randomly have them. And what happens when I do this is, as we go through, first P1 will be constructed, then P2 will be constructed. Then when we hit this close brace, P2 will go out of scope and be cleaned up, and the destructor will go off. Then we'll return from the function, and that will clean up P1. P1 will get destructed. Let me prove this to you. I don't need to do this under the debugger. I'll just use Control F5. Let it build. First we constructed P1, which is me, then P2, which is someone else. Then, because we reached that close brace, we destructed P2, and finally destructed P1. Understanding the scope of objects that you allocate is important to know. The constructor goes off when control reaches that line. The destructor goes off when the object goes out of scope. I didn't need to keep track of these person objects myself and clean them up. Destructors went off simply because control reached this close brace, and that took the object out of scope. Important thing to understand that much of this is done for you automatically, and it's an important part of thinking like a C++ developer.